Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another Product Growth Leaders topic of the week. We got a really good panel. The three of us are going to have a great conversation today. Steve Johnson, my partner, and our longtime regular, Cory Bryan. And we're going to be talking about product management and technology-led companies. The concept of product-led has been sort of getting a lot of press over the past year or so, but, and I still have some issues with that. Maybe that's going to be a call we do another time, because I think I still see people asking, what is product led? And sometimes it's product management's making the decisions and focusing us where we're going. Sometimes it's that freemium model of a Zoom or Slack or whatever it may be that's used as an example. My career, I had more experience working with technology or sales led companies, right? Where you've got somebody other than product management being market focused, making decisions. And technology led is a very specific, probably coming from, we're technology companies. And so it's often a place, a CTO or a head of technology or an architect or somebody is probably have an overweight take on what we should be doing. And so we decided to talk about this. Steve, how often do you run into technology-led companies versus product or market-focused companies or informed companies?
I think technology-led. Now, let me do it another way. I think through my career, most of the companies I encountered were technology-led. It was technology people who started the company, and it's still very technology-focused. And I remember I was an executive at one company, and there was a 10% bonus bump for everybody in a, quote, technical position, as opposed to a staff position or a product position or a sales position, which was kind of interesting. And yet I think more today, I more encounter companies that are sales led, that they have failed to find market fit. And so their solution is to do customization for every client.
Yeah. I've seen that.
And they don't recognize that as an error, that we haven't gotten product market fit, and therefore we haven't solved anybody's problem. We've solved 80% of everybody's problem. Yeah. But not 100% of anyone's problem.
They're doing good if they're solving 80% of the problems, because I see them solving 50% of the problem, and everything's custom and everything's new. Cory, how about yourself? I mean, what's your experience with technology led? I mean, do you see that a lot?
I've been seeing it a lot lately. The main reason, or the main places I see this, is where it's a technology product. So it's a product for developers. It's a product for this type of thing. Those are the ones where I seem to see engineers and architects, like you're talking about, being the ones who make decisions, and those decisions are the ones that get implemented by everybody else. Everybody kind of defers to those. It also happens where the founder or the person at the highest decision-making point has a background in engineering or a background in something, and that's what they'll usually lean on, is their experience and what they know and what they feel comfortable with, to go ahead and say, you know what, this cool new NFT thing is great and everybody's going to use it, and let's go build it. And nobody knows what the hell it is, but hey, it's a cool tech. Don't you want cool tech?
And that's one of the symptoms I see a lot in these types of companies. And we'll get into the question that shortly. I'm going to sort of go out there, maybe be a little provocative, and say part of the reason we may be seeing more technology-led companies is because product management has been pulled into this technology focus, right? The technology role of product management, and you don't have that equilibrium, a balance of somebody who's driving for the market focus or not. We're hearing a lot from people in the community about how, the business role of product management has really been, needs to be fought for. And I think perhaps one of the things that we need to think about is how, if we don't have somebody counterbalancing the technology side, or the sales side for that matter, where do we go? And maybe product led or market focus is the way we tend to come from, is the way that we can create that balance to either the sales or the technology led. So sort of nice little intro there. We went on Monday, we put into the community our Question: how can a product leader in a technology-led company best enable product management success? Because part of the problem here is if it's technology-led, the more it's technology-led, the more that product management becomes this, servant to the technology team and where we're going. And Sunkant Palo, who has done a lot of digitization work in major companies, he actually attached a thing he had wrote sort of about this, but he talked about using your leadership and managerial leverage. So understand what leverage you have and then lead with strategic context. And I thought this was a great answer because part of it is sometimes I know I've have been reactive in this type of situation where you need to take that step back and really find a way to go forward and leverage your manager and leadership skills and provide context to help them see the right things and get them to their stuff. Paul Hatala, a longtime contributor, said, before you join the company, determine whether you're happy being in a tech playground. Right. know where you are and how you go with that and where you need to go. Steve,
before you go off that reply, how do you know if you're getting into that scenario? I people have asked me in the past, and I'm not sure I've ever had a very satisfactory answer. I mean, how do you know you're getting into a technology-led company? I mean, you could guess. It's like, the founder used to be a developer. Okay, maybe they're a technology-led company. And in the case of a sales-driven company, it's probably a little easier. You could ask some simple questions like, was the CEO in sales, and how often do you do custom work for individual clients? And those two questions will tell you you're absolutely in a sales-driven company. But how do you tell if you're in a technology-led company when you're interviewing? I mean,
product management reports up to the CTO.
Oh, that's the pretty quick one, isn't it?
That's good. Yeah.
Right. That's, at least in my view, one of the first places we can look at is going to be, where does product management report? If it reports to CTO, that's, to me, now, I'm not going to judge all CTOs with one skin, right? I look at
we're consultants. We do that all the time.
No, but I know a good executive at a C-suite no longer needs to be the subject matter expert they were in the topic. So the example I like to use, if you have a controller who is promoted to CFO, they need to stop being a controller. They need to stop about managing risk. They need to start being more strategic. So I have seen a CTO own product management, and once they own product management, they truly do bifurcate their head and start thinking both from the product strategic role and the technology role, because they're managing the department. They're not they shouldn't be the person making the technology decisions anymore if they're in that role when they're doing it. But
yeah, but to me, in some ways, it's very much like the VP of sales and marketing, which is like, to me, VP of of Fox and Hen House. It's marketing is supposed to be much more thoughtful and strategic and market oriented, and sales is very today and one customer oriented, and they're two very different hats to wear. And so when I see a VP of technology that is really a VP of development and product management, it's like too many hats. It's, how do you be technology oriented and business oriented at the same time? And to your point, I'm sure we've all encountered people who are both.
Yeah.
So I have a thought, and I've done this a couple times the last few months, is when I get a place where I want to interview at, and I look at their site, I look at their product page and the products that they offer. And if those products seem like a human, not that developers aren't humans, but a customer focused solution versus hey, here's this cool technology that does these things, but there's no kind of real product there. It's more like an API or a service or some back end thing. That kind of gives me a leverage of, okay, this is, and I've had both of those examples in the last week of a product that was focused, or business that was focused on helping, non-developers, and a business that was focused on helping developers. And so that's kind of where I drew that line. But I like that notion of who does this report to?
But I do like what you're saying there, because if we can look at this and say, okay, how do they talk about their products? If they talk about the persona and understand the problems and the pain and the value, and they talk that way, there's a good sign that they might be a little more business and strategic with product. The other way I would look at it is I would want to talk to some product managers and ask them that simple question: where do you spend most of your time?
Good one.
Are you spending more time out talking to customers and working with all stakeholders, or are you, as Steve likes to say, that secretary who's just reading aloud from Jira to development, and you're spending your time writing, user stories, and you live in Jira? I think that could be a sign for it. So to Paul's point, if you can find out before. Now, I've made this mistake. His view is, if you notice that, realize that they're probably not going to want to become market driven or market focused, and just don't do it. I've got, maybe it's a God complex sometimes, but I'm the one who can fix them, right? The only reason they haven't been fixed is I haven't, but every time I've tried that, it's not worked. I think I tend to agree with
It's really
Paul.
hard for one person to change a culture.
Yeah.
Unless perhaps that person's at the top, but even then I wonder.
Well, and I think,
remembering my rant about personas, in the absence of a persona, developers program to themselves or their parents.
That's a good way. Ask who their personas are. What are your top 3 personas that you're targeting? And if they're all developers,
a front-end developer, a back-end developer, and an infrastructure developer.
No, a full stack developer is the third one.
Or what are personas?
Yeah.
No, we don't use those. That's a marketing thing.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that both times that I was something, I can be the one to change it, it was a sales-led founder, right? And so I think there's probably some similarities between sales-led and technology-led. We'll get that until a little later. Jason Vincelette said that he found that keeping DevOps in the loop and discussing the roadmap and needs can help reduce chaos. So go back to what Suncat was saying with the strategic context. Make sure you're communicating them. Make sure you're doing what you can. Help them with what they can. Help them deliver success. It's almost like nudge them, baby steps, with where we can go with that. Mei Wong wrote an essay and talked about the how inertia is tough to do. And if you want to fight the battle, find allies, gain access to product analytics and usage, because data is often obfuscated and accessible in the organization. And if you can do a better job of using data to help people make decisions and guide decisions, perhaps the thought is that if it's a technology-led company, they're going to be more swayed by data than they may be where in a sales-led company, it may be more swayed by anecdotal and the stories that we can tell.
Good point. That reminds me as well. I was having a development meeting the day after I'd had a customer meeting, and we were talking about some of the issues that I uncovered and everything else. And one of the developers said, well, I hear all the things you're saying here, but you have to admit, we've got a brilliant user interface. Only a developer, I think, would say that. But nonetheless, it so happened that I had recorded something the prior day, and I pulled it up on my phone and I played the customer saying, I don't know who did your UI, but they should be fired. And hearing it in the customer's voice as opposed to me just complaining about it seemed to really open their eyes. And I think that even there, a customer anecdote carries a lot of value. But to your earlier point, I really need to have 3 of those or 7 of those.
Yeah.
Right. And I had a similar situation. I sat down with beta. I was doing a beta, and the reviews were not good. And I had like 13 write-ups, and I could see the CTO scanning the write-ups and doing a little spreadsheet in his head that was so fascinating. And he said, well, what I noticed is the last 5 who joined the beta program gave us much better scores than the first 7. and I'm like, how did you do that trend in your head? And, his take was, we obviously the later betas were better than the earlier betas, but, even so, none of the betas, I mean, I had a very simple one. None of the betas said they had any intention of installing this in production.
Yeah.
So using data, using market facts to make your point may be a way of getting a technology-led company to be more customer-centric.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll go into a little more. You made me start thinking about how is the product actually performing, right? No need, if the product's performing, it could be technology-led and they've built the right solution and they don't, they're still performing well, but I'll talk about that. Cory, you said, I have more questions than answers with scenario. It mostly sucks. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that.
It's one of the things to pull what Paul was saying. If you're going to do this, accept the fact that it's a technology-led company. Accept the fact that it's not going to be what the ideal would be for most product managers. We would not want to work there, I would assume. We'd want to work in somewhere that's focused on product and market and making individual customers' lives better. For me, if I'm in this type of situation, I would say, okay, great. How can I help you? How can I find out what's important to those technology or business leaders? What are you what would success look like to you? If this was to go exactly the way you hoped it would, what would that look like?
Yep.
And then kind of work backwards from there and say, okay, this seems to be targeted at this type of audience, whether the audience is developers or some other, normal user. They just can't put it in those terms because they're not familiar with it. Maybe translating that into some type of customer benefit and saying, hey, it seems like we're trying to help these people do this thing. Cool. And your technology is going to do that. Absolutely. Great. Let's figure out how I can connect that for you. So most technology companies don't think of that, or at least technology people don't think of that. They see, again, cool new tech, or I'm the expert in this field and I've given, 47 talks on this thing. And that's, I want to hire somebody exactly like me when I hire somebody. But helping them see that at some point, a human that we would like to have purchase our product will need to use this and get some benefit from it. Let's talk about that.
I completely and totally agree. And actually, sort of the direction I was going to be heading is first, there has to be bad results in the company for them to want to make any change, right? If they're still hitting their numbers, and I've seen people hit their numbers through sheer dumb luck, but if they're hitting their numbers, right, they're probably not going to change. So first you have to have them want to change, right? They have to accept that there's a problem, they need to do it. And
the
for
first
me,
step of any 12-step program is to admit you have a problem.
My career success was built on the backs of turnaround. Take a company or product that has stalled, come in and figure out how to get it growing again. And it was a fairly simple playbook. Go talk to customers and listen to them, understand their problems and what they value, and update your product to suit that, right? So for me, the way I would do this is you have to get somebody wanting to change, whether they see the tea leaves and they realize that something's not sustainable, or there is a tech debt bomb that's about to go off, because these people are actually pretty good at understanding that. You have to get them to want to change, right? It's that first step, acceptance. Or is it the second step? Denial is the first step. And once you have them willing to do that, for me, it's get a couple allies, as May said, and bring them out with you. Bring them into the field to talk to customers, to listen to customers, to learn, to understand the problems. Have them be part of your problem discovery and do that type of stuff, because that's going to give them more empathy. And then once you can get these key allies, A, they want to change, and B, all of a sudden, where they were living in a vacuum with no real knowledge of the customers and their problems and that type of stuff. Now they're seeing it firsthand. They've heard it. They've built these personal connections, because they're not AI, they're not robots. Then we have a chance to make some change happen. And that's, I think, but if to Paul's point, if they're set in their ways and they're not going to change, there's not a reason for them to want to change. I think it's a tough way to go. And any last thoughts on how we can get how do you best succeed as a product management leader in a technology-led company to get success? Or are you guys ready to go to the poll?
Go to the poll.
All right. So on Wednesday, we asked the question, what is the most common negative product result in a technology-led company? Our options were, if you build it, they will come products, product and features that are over-engineered, products with poor UX, products built with unproven new technology, and it depends other. This was sort of a runaway. I mean, 2 ran off the top, but Steve, you had voted for if you build it, they will come products. Talk to me about with 53% of the votes. So that's clearly a leader in the clubhouse.
Well, yeah, that's my catchphrase that we all use, but it's my indicator of technology-led companies. The failure of companies that fail to grow. I have 2 key phrases. It's either if we build it, they will come, or it's I talked to a guy, which is for a sales team, a salesperson is a completed research study. One data point causes them to build a product. You're in a sales-led organization. If it's we built this and it didn't do well and we don't know why, it's probably if they build it, they will. If we build it, they will come.
And those are often the products you see in search of a market, right? Somebody built something that was cool, and they were solving a amorphous problem, right? They had something they were solving, or they were enabling somebody to do something, but they really didn't understand the pain, the problem, the persona. And sometimes I've seen a very generic solution that maybe needed to be more specific.
But let me go down that just a slightly different way. The first product is always market driven. Otherwise, they would never have gotten off the ground. The founder built a product that he or she needed in their day job, and convinced their family they could quit their job and do this full time. But, the family said, I want to see some serious risk mitigation here before you quit your job, And so, boom, the first product was great. 18 months later, the president's like, I didn't realize that I was omniscient until I started my own company. I've got these 3 other ideas. Let's go build this and this and this. And the second product is almost always a poor performer. And the third one is almost always a disaster. And you keep hearing them say, how did we get that right in the first one? And if you can point them to the fact that it was driven by the needs of the founder and a bunch of other personas that were very much like the founder, then you can scooch them into a market-driven role, a market-driven orientation.
That's the notion of I love that the concept of the founder built it for a market of one himself. And he said, everybody who does what I do will love this, and I will go talk to them and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll buy that. And then they never do, of course. But the guy, the founder builds it. He builds a company, gets investors, and it sounds hot and everything else. And there's all these great things that this product is going to do at some point. It never actually does it, or it does it within the founder's little box that nobody else can buy into. Or it's like, oh, it'd be nice if it did this, but it doesn't, so I'm not going to do it. And the founder says, well, that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and so,
but my argument is that founder never quit his day job.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
he didn't do the
never,
risk mitigation.
So it's the technology-led founder who's on his second or third company. And, I hate to disparage Steve Jobs because I think he was brilliant, but he did not do well with Nest, because he came in there saying, I created Apple, let me build the next operating system, and
Yeah.
it'll be this $10,000 computer that not a single college professor can afford, and it will be brilliant. And it was all of those things. I mean, it was brilliant, but nobody bought it because, come on, who's got $10,000 for a $2,000 computer?
So what I would say is, I don't think every founder, the first time they're not successful. I've seen plenty of products that were somebody built it because they thought it was cool. If it's
And they happen to be like a bunch of other people. There happened to be a bunch of other people that were just like them, and that's how they achieved their success. It's the second one that's the tricky one.
No, those that did in the first one, yes, I agree with that. But I still think there's a lot of people who, in their first product, build something that's just, that maybe we're getting to $1 million in revenue. Okay, is that a success? No, but I've seen a lot of companies do that, and that's about where they plateau, because they found that 2 or 3 people. But they are often it's also a technology-led company. If a founder is coming from the industry and knows a problem and is solving that problem for a specific role they played because they knew it and they have a tech person to help them do it, great chance of success. Too often you see these technology kids coming out of school like, ooh, I've got this great idea to build some functionality, and it doesn't really solve any problems. That's totally technology led. Cory, you said products and features that are over engineered. So that was second place with 30%. Talk to me about, defend that one.
So that's where I've talked to folks that have been building their product ideas or building their companies around this product, and they've been doing it for years. They've got a handful of beta customers that are advising them or something else, but they haven't really released a product in the market yet because they're not ready. I talked to one who had been working on this I've talked to a couple who've been working on it for 3 years, and they haven't released hardly anything, but they've got this roadmap that they're working on for the next 3 years that are going to build all these courses and all these cool things and everything else. I'm like, what does it do now? You've been working on it for 3 years. What can you do today with it? Who's paying you today for it? And they just, because they're so comfortable in the building, and if we just get this done, it'll be great. Everybody will love it when we're finally finished with it, way into the future. So they build and build and build instead of build a little bit, test a little bit, validate, and then go back and do it. They've got the worst case of 100% mentality.
Perfect is the enemy of done.
Yeah. So they aren't ready to launch. They just need one more thing.
Gold plated.
And I've actually challenged a couple of them on some of these interviews, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we could do that." What's stopping you from doing
I've
that?
I've seen that not just in startups. I've seen that in enterprise companies, right?
Yeah.
They keep gold plating. My first job out of grad school, we were in a e-commerce EDI type company, and they put like 5 layers of redundancy in the network. And because of that, we had to price ourselves so much more than the market because they had to pay for the cost of the network. And it's because they came from a background where you needed, mission critical stuff needed 5 layers of redundancy to take people to the moon or something like that. But it was tough because they didn't understand the market requirements and what was required, and they over engineered. So I've totally seen that happen with that. Go ahead, Cory.
It's also on a small scale. It's something where if I'm talking to an engineer or a designer or somebody else, and they can break something into like a day's work versus we can't do anything until we've thought about this for 6 months. Those are 2 polar opposites. And again, most people are somewhere in the middle, but it's amazing to me how the first 5 minutes I'm talking to somebody and I'm talking to them about building something, and I say, is it possible to just book a one-way flight to Boston? They go, no, we can't do that. Versus the people go, it's no problem. That to me tells me so much about their mentality about we have to over-engineer this to get anything. I'm not going to be comfortable until I have every database table that I'm ever going to need with every API. And I've given it to some tester and they've come back and I've written the requirements documents or something else. But versus the person that says, let me hack together something and see what I can do.
This is sort of where the lean startup mentality actually comes in handy, right?
It
build
does. And
something,
it's at
test
that
it, learn it,
code
granule.
level. It's
Yeah.
at that technology level of I can do a little bit today versus I have to do everything at some point in the future.
No,
Mhm.
makes a ton of sense. I voted, and now I voted this morning, and I looked at the fact that I could either just pile on to if you build it, they will come products, and normally the first one in there is normally what I vote for because it's the first one that comes to my mind. But that wasn't going to be the difference of it winning or losing, so I decided to vote to make a story, and so I went with products built with unproven new technology. I was doing some work for a private equity portfolio company, and their CTO, it was a very engineering led company. Their CTO always wanted to use the coolest, newest technology that wasn't supported, technology that you don't even know if it's going to be around in 3 years, right? And so they made some bets on some database technology and some front end platform technology that, unfortunately, those two platforms they were using never made it to mass. So they couldn't hire people who had skills. It wasn't supported anymore. So they had to hire people, expensive consultants to sort of customize and support it for them. So I've seen in the technology led companies, a lot of times these people are like really fall in love with some cool new technology, and they don't think about the business impact of making that decision because they're just thinking about, I want to work on a cool technology. So,
and to leverage what Suzanne's answer was, which was the other choice of poor UX,
yeah,
most of the time those products are designed for developers, and the UX is a afterthought or a consideration of, again, this is not a customer facing, end user facing product. The other developers will get it. So we're not going to spend much time on the UX. Actually, we're not going to spend much time on the UI side, excuse me.
yeah.
The UX, they are dog fooding it, so they are part of the experience, but they don't spend a lot of time on, workflows and shaders and things like that. It's just a screen with a thing to call an API. That's all you need.
Well, and this goes back to Steve's point earlier about if you don't give a persona to development, they're going to design it for themselves, even
Yes.
if it is meant for a persona. I think, is the ATM the story we've told before? In ATMs were originally, I don't know, it was you, maybe it was somebody else. Cash machines were originally designed by engineers with no persona in mind, and so that's why they were so hard to use early on in the green screen days. They're still not the easiest to use. So, all right.
Well, and today's problem with ATMs, just to go down a rabbit hole, is the bankers want it to be an advertising platform. And so they're like, you should get a loan, press this thing to apply for a loan. And I'm like, do you really think I'm going to sit in my car and apply for a loan through the ATM? I mean, it feels like I want to go in and actually talk to someone, but maybe that's the difference between my age and somebody else's age.
It's the same reason you can't stop and get gas anymore without being blasted by TV ads and everything else. Anything that has a screen, somebody's going to put an ad on it and ask you to do something.
You're absolutely right.
I will give some credit. There's some of the ATMs I've used that actually allow you to store preferences for language. So it knows that I'm going to speak English. It allows me to store preferences for what is my quick withdrawal. And I like the ones that allow you to choose what type of bills do you want and what denomination. I mean, that's like advanced math for an ATM. I digress. First question for today. Which is harder to deal with? I'm looking at the wrong thing. Which is the hardest thing for a product manager to deal with at a technology-led company? So we're product leaders. We got product managers. What are the hardest things for a product manager to deal with at a technology-led company? Steve, Cory, Art, whomever.
I was going to say probably understanding the technology itself.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not technical. I've done test automation and I can understand, what technology benefits there are. If I look at a technology like React or data lakes or something like that, I can understand what the benefits and the cons are for those things. If somebody wants to sit down with me and walk through their code for an hour, I'm going to slip my wrists. I don't want to do it. I don't want to talk about the code. I don't want to see the code. I'm fine. When I've had conversations with developers on stories or things that we're working on, and they want to bring me over to talk about something, I sit and look at them. I focus
Mm.
on them. I talk to them. They're looking and pointing at their screen, and I can't look at it because I will get dizzy and fall down. And then they start talking about what it does, and I'll ask them questions about, okay, what are you trying to do? I'm basically the rubber duck in rubber duck debugging.
Yeah.
I'm giving them the sounding board to talk through ideas and ask them questions about their code in English or whatever language they choose to speak.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but I just, to me, please do not talk about and show me your code because I do
Mhm.
not care.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait. Before I go to Steve, is rubber duck debugging really a thing?
It really is a thing, and it's something where and I forgot who it was that came up with it, but a lot of people promoted it, especially people who are working remotely or something like that, or they're working on open source projects where they're working by themselves most of the time. If you put a rubber duck on your monitor as a developer, it's so therapeutic to talk out loud to that duck, to get thoughts out of your heads, and it's kind of like walking around the building and you're
Hmm.
not thinking about the thing and suddenly you figure out the solution for it and come back in and finish it. Rubber duck debugging is a way to do that
I
same type of thing.
I did not know
And
that. I
there,
thought you were going to Ernie and Bert singing "Rubber Ducky, You're the One." I
No.
it there no, he's right. There's a Wikipedia article about it called Rubber Duck Debugging, and it's forcing the developers to talk in English, right?
yeah,
Talk in natural language.
get outside of
So
their own
I'm
head.
going to agree with Cory. I was going to make the same point, different, but maybe a different slice of it. I have found in the technology company work, technology-led companies I've been in, is so many people start a sentence off with, "Well, what you have to understand is," and they tell us some arcane thing that makes it so because of architectural choices they made, we can't do this thing that I want done, or they can't something, and I have found in my career, I have literally never needed to know anything that follows the phrase, what you have to understand is. It's like long preamble that says, because of some technology arcane poor choice we made a long time ago, ... And I'm like, fine, let's just call it that, arcane technology choice. But I agree also with Cory that I have had those conversations and I have looked at that code. And sometimes I'm like, that's a different variable here than there. And then they go, oh shoot, you're right, I copied that from a different library. But mostly I spend my time saying, well, let me talk to you about how that thing you just said will solve the problem that I started with. So here's the persona. They come into their job, they sit down and they start working, and then they get a phone call, and so the thing has to save its state, or else when they come back, they're going to have to start all over again. And they go, oh yeah, I see that now. Now I understand. So natural
I
language is good.
I like both of those. I had two ideas sort of come to mind. The first one that came to mind is, and this was part of my problem, the frustration that I'm being forced to spend more time in an admin type role and not out talking to customers and learning. So one of the hardest things for me was that I know that I could be doing something different and it could be impacting the result of the company, but I was sort of trapped in this servant, role, not being able to do that. But what came to me when you guys were talking was, one of the hardest things to deal with at a technology-led company is the technology debt that gets created, and how much you focus is on you have to focus on technology debt. And I'll go back to people using unsupported platforms and stuff like that, where they're doing these cool things, they're building things that are for a party of one, and all of a sudden I found myself spending more time having to deal with technology debt, not having the cycles to deal with solving real problems out there in the market.
So this, I told you my first hardest thing. I'll tell you my second hardest thing, which is related to the poll, which was getting a developer to, or getting an engineer to understand that all we need is this one little thing. We don't need you to build a month's worth of things. We need you to build a day's worth of things.
The good enough.
The good enough, the small slice, the small vertical slice. Again, once people understand that, they're wonderful to work with. The people that don't understand that or don't want to understand that or reject that notion, those people, again, it's one of these things. It's the hardest thing to try to get somebody to say is, can we build something, let's say in 2 weeks, and get it out to production? And if not, why not?
Yeah, it's a mindset shift.
And yet, one of my favorite new lines is quality doesn't matter until it does, and then it's too late. And so I appreciate the technologists' need to make things robust and fault tolerant. And yet I totally hear your thing of, you don't want to gold plate it, you don't want to over engineer it. But on the other side, we've got the more sales driven culture saying, well, let's just build some crap and put it out there. And then they do, over the reluctance of the technical team, they put it out, and then something bad happens, and the salespeople turn around and say, well, how did you let this happen? So we need to find this magic balance between ship shit fast and don't ship anything because we're trying to make it perfect.
And that's where prototypes and MVPs or whatever it may be, let's test to make sure we do it, and then let's understand what level of quality needs to be, so we know we're solving the right problem, and we have it's judging that what is good enough, right? And I think that's one of the hardest things to do out there.
And let me say another thing in that neighborhood. Toy Story was a surprise hit for Pixar and Disney. And the Disney people, by that time, at that time, they had not yet bought Pixar. Disney turned to Pixar and said, now I want you to do Toy Story 2, but it doesn't have to be good. We're going straight to video. So, it's just going to be something moms pick up for their kids, and kids will watch anything. Kids are stupid. And so the Pixar team started trying to build a shitty Toy Story, and finally determined they couldn't do it. They said, I can't work on something that I don't feel passionate about. And oh, by the way, Toy Story 2 turned out to be the better movie, and I think got more awards.
So there's a phrase that I've used, and it's going to sound like I'm back and forth on this, but the over-engineered product versus the heavily polished product is something that I want to work on, a product that's heavily polished. I want to work on a product that is obsessed about their core value and constantly iterates, makes that better. To me, that's not over engineering. To me, that's getting to the point where even you see it a lot in games, or I've seen it in modules or things like that, where the interaction is just perfect.
Elegant.
It just feels good. It's elegant. It's well designed. It's well thought. The tones when you hit the button, and the sparkles and the all that stuff is just magical. That to me is not over engineered. That to me is an excessive level of polish that I absolutely love in products.
But
that's craftsmanship.
It's design. It's where design and a good UX person comes in and can do that. But your Toy Story story, Steve, I was just listening to one of our old, I don't even remember which one it was, but you told that exact same story.
Did I tell it the same way?
A little different, but I smiled when you said Toy Story. But what you sort of have is that technology versus sales-led company, right? Or design, polish company versus sales-led. Which is harder to deal with as a product manager, product leader? Technology led or sales led? I mean, I don't even get the question finished.
Sales.
Why?
Because they usually have more power in the company, and they usually can push more shit down the tube.
Okay. Steve, why do you think?
I find that sales led companies use, as Cory called it out, use political pressure to deliver poor quality. They struggle to focus on a market segment or a persona, and they sell to anyone. One of my favorites, my sales guy came and said, "When are we going to support this obsolete operating system?" And I said, "Never, never, never, never." So a week later, he came back and said, "We won the RFP." He bid for it anyway. And yes, we lost points because we don't offer support for the obsolete operating system. So when are you going to provide support for the obsolete operating system? And the answer is still what I told you last week: never, 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 never. And of course, he escalated that to the VP. In this case, the VP said, "Well, Steve, what's it going to cost?" And I said, "Well, first of all, we don't know anyone who can work in that operating system." And I think in a sales-led organization, they often think of developers as factory workers that are extremely fungible and can work on anything. It's just they don't have the sense is that developers don't have the moxie to do the work or the commitment to the work. And it's like, no, working on an obsolete operating system is impossible to do and is not worth our time. But nonetheless, ultimately the company came to the realization that spending precious development resource on an obsolete operating system versus the next release of a popular operating system was a better use of resources.
So the other thing that I'll say, and Steve, you helped me kind of crystallize this, is the sales-led organizations, they stop caring when the sale is made. When the sale is done, does not matter what happens after that. We've made the sale. The technology-led organizations, at least they're creating something. And that's something that you can sell. Sales-led usually sells vaporware or things that make no sense or something else. As long as they get the sale, that's all they care about. And technology-led organizations, usually, as long as they can build the product, that's what they care about. But I'd much rather have the second problem of technology-led than the first problem of sales-led.
Agreed. And of course, we're consultants, so we're overestimating and we're over committing all of this here. I mean,
we're making it black and white.
Lovely people, but there are certainly in many sales-led organizations, sales leads the company astray.
And I was going to try to make some devil's advocate argument that, well, but sales-led, they're at least closer to the customer and they understand the problems and it'll be easier to get them to understand the market and the business.
Closer to a customer.
I said I was going to try to make a devil's advocate, but the more we talked about this, the more sales, I would tend to agree. And I think that, this conversation on this question has validated that I probably should do a follow-up topic of the week, which is a sales-led one, because obviously that's more of an issue for product management to deal with than a technology-led company. So I think we'll be seeing it again in the future.
And in fairness, one more time thing, in fairness to the sales team, they're doing exactly what they've been told to do.
Incentivized to do.
Yeah. Go out there and find somebody with money and bring me the money and we'll take care of it here at the office.
And you'll get your bonus.
Yeah.
Yep. I completely, totally agree. So our lightning round, which can be a little thunder, but what is your advice to a new product leader that is struggling in a technology-led company? And Cory, we're going to start with you.
Leave.
Oh, he went lightning with that.
I was going to say the same thing, but I was trying to think of something more politically astute, perhaps.
Well, but
accept it sucks and figure out a way to connect the dots.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Steve.
Truly, truly, truly represent the customer. In every discussion in a technology-led company, say, here's what the market says. Here's what this customer told me the other day. Let me play this recording for you that I have. Constantly be the customer advocate, which is a message to product managers or product leaders that you cannot just be repeating what sales said. You have to have firsthand experience with real people who have real problems that our technology can solve.
So I'm going to take that one step further. Two situations in my career, or one was college. In grad school, I had a special leadership class in the MBA program taught by the guy who turned the AS400 program around back in the 80s for IBM. Got them to the Malcolm Baldrige Award. And his whole point was, you know how I did it? And he's like, I made the engineers go on trips to customers to see their problems, understand what they're
Yep.
doing. And that single point changed it. And then CEO who I worked with at IHS, he came to turn it around. And the first thing he did is he made every executive director level and above go visit 3 customers a month for the first 6 months. And so my advice is start getting some of the technology leads out to customers for them to see it, for them to understand firsthand, to get them, because when that connection can be made, hopefully the switch goes in their head and they start thinking more about that than just the technology. But it's not an easy situation either way. But we live in a time where there's a lot of technology-led companies because software is eating the world, or AI is going to be eating the world, and technology, whether you're even just technology enabled, you need to be able to do this type of stuff. What a great conversation. Steve, Cory, thank you so much for going on this journey with me on this conversation. It really made me think. And as I said a couple times, I changed what I was going to say because of some of the stuff we're said in here. And we do this every week in the community. On Monday, the question goes in. Wednesday, we have a poll. And Friday, we have these wonderful conversations. So Steve, Cory, thank you for a great conversation. We'll see you guys next week in the community. Take care, everybody.